Please, allow me to give you a hypothetical scenario. You've got a character. This character's job is to trigger transformative reactions like hyperbloom. You've done a decent job building this character. They have 1066 EM. They're currently doing 25,064 damage per hyperbloom to a certain enemy. What if you found out there was something you could do to change that number to 33,658 damage per hyperbloom to that enemy that wouldn't require weeks of artifact farming hoping for god artifacts for menial increases to your damage, pulling on a weapon banner for a higher EM weapon, building another character altogether, changing up your team, or adjusting your rotation? Very little RNG is involved, and it will only take 4 to 5 days worth of resin to do it. No gimmicks, no need to drop any money. You're at 1066 EM and doing 25,064 damage hyperblooms, and you do this thing, your damage is guaranteed to increase to that 33,658 number figure. More than a 25% increase. A higher increase than most 5-star characters get with their constellations. Would you do it? I'm Souldapop, and I might sound like a snake oil salesman, but I assure you this is 100% real. It might sound like you're selling your soul or exploiting the game, but this is a trick that's been in the game since the beginning. It's something you're even expected to do. The thing is, early on in the game's life, a lot of misconceptions floated around that led a lot of players to believe it was something they shouldn't do. Eventually, most players came around to the idea of doing it for Animo characters like Sucrose, Venti, and Kazuha. But there was still a stigma against doing it to anyone else. Some content creators gave their audience the impression that there was something special about the swirl reaction specifically that made it worth doing this thing for those units, but not for others. Still, some continued to preach the gospel of this practice being sacrilege. Unfortunately, that sentiment is still commonplace within the community. This misconception has long been debunked, but a sizable audience in the community still hasn't heard this revelation. They might see other players do it and assume they're just doing it because it's their waifu. Some players spend a lot of money to improve their characters, but get really frustrated when they see someone free to play keep up with their performance without investing monetarily, as they have. All while the difference is the first thing that you see about a character. It's their level. It's in the title and the thumbnail. There's no need to tease it. It's their level. In this hypothetical scenario I gave you, the character doing 25,000 damage was at level 80. It sounds crazy, but that jump to almost 34,000 is entirely due to leveling that character to 90. No changes to artifacts, no changes to weapons, no changes to team comps, rotations. That massive increase was just by going from level 80 to level 90. I'm using my Shangling here to demonstrate this because Burgeon and Hyperbloom have the same reaction multiplier, and I was going to level her anyway for part 2 of this video. Bit of a disclaimer, Shangling isn't great for Burgeon, but Guoba makes it pretty easy to set things up to get footage of the raw numbers involved. I recognize that a lot of misconceptions arise because a content creator says something but doesn't explain it well because in a lot of cases they just don't know the reasons themselves. I also know that these explanations can be a little hard to grasp, and that's the main reason I wanted to make these videos. So I'd like to take a bit to try and give a rudimentary explanation for how this works, so you can feel a little more confident in your decision to invest into these characters' levels. Also, because unfortunately there will probably be a point where you might need to explain it to someone else. I can't clear up these misconceptions myself, so hopefully you'll be able to walk away from this video with a basic enough understanding to explain these in a non-confrontational and non-condescending way. This is the damage formula for transformative reactions. I know it might seem a little spooky, but it basically boils down to a number for a specific type of reaction times a number at a certain level times a number for a certain amount of EM times enemy resistance, which is its own thing, which would be its own video's worth of explaining. So, 4 numbers multiplied together. Now, you may remember something called the order of operations. It's a system that tells us what to do first. In the order of operations, you always do things in parentheses before doing things outside of them. So this big scary blob of stuff right here, right now, we don't need to think too much about solving what's inside this parentheses. We just need to see what's happening. This line right here means this is being divided by this. The important thing to know about that is typically when you divide something by something else, the answer is smaller. What this means is that whatever number we put in for EM here has to be pretty big in order for the equation to still be big once it's solved. Conversely, the rest of the equation is multiplying. When you multiply things together, they typically get bigger. Multiplying bigger numbers together gets you even bigger numbers. If you multiply 10 times 2, you get 20. But just moving up one number from 2 to 3, 10 times 3, would get you 30, which is a 50% increase over the previous number. So you can see you don't have to increase numbers by a lot to get dramatic increases when you multiply them together. That's what's happening from level 80 to level 90. Instead of multiplying by 1077.44 at level 80, you're multiplying by 1446.85 at level 90. That's an increase of 369.41 to that multiplier, which is more than 34% higher than it was. So, even from a strictly mathematical perspective, it takes a lot less investment to get significant increases to your damage by increasing your level than it does to increase it with EM. Luckily for us, that increase costs less investment in-game as well. Now, I know that 221 heroes wit might sound like a lot, but it's really not. 160 resin typically yields around 30 heroes wit and 50 adventurous experience from ley lines at world level 8. 4 of which equals a hero's wit, meaning you'll typically get the equivalent of 40 to 45 hero's wit just by spending your resin on ley lines when it's capped. That's 5 days on average. That's not even considering getting them from the teapot, quest rewards, chests, the battle pass, events, and all the other little things that Hoyo likes to throw heroes wit at us with. Now, think about the last time you tried to upgrade an artifact. How long it took to get that artifact. How much resin you spent. And think about the increase that artifact gave you when you finally got it. Was it bigger than 25%? Many players are losing their minds in artifact domains for level 80 characters they have already built functionally well for an increase that might come to about 10% if they're really lucky. While sitting on experience books, they could feed that character to get more than double that increase to their damage. All because of this misconception that you shouldn't level your characters to 90. Now, for clarity, I'm talking about characters whose purpose is to trigger transformative reactions, as you'll see on screen. Obviously, that's not every character. But I'm not saying you should only level 90 characters that trigger transformative reactions. This is just where you'll typically see the most benefits. There are definitely arguments that can be made for leveling other characters to 90, and I'll break those arguments down in my next video. If you've learned something or you're interested in finding out the benefits other characters might have from being leveled, please feel free to subscribe so you don't miss my next upload. If you've got any questions for topics I should discuss in the future, feel free to leave a comment, or you could stop by my Twitch, twitch.tv/Souldapop. I stream every day, and I'm always down to help out however I can. Thanks for hanging out, and hopefully I'll see you next time.